5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
You're listening to the GHT Overland podcast.
Lisa, if you were to think of someplace warm with sandy beaches, amazing waterfalls, and delightful tacos, a place previously mentioned from a past guest as Taco Heaven, where do you think I'm talking about?
Mexico.
How about going even further to Panama?
Sounds good to me. If you had a Toyota T100 with a canopy for your overland rig, how would you get it ready?
I would make sure it's in good working condition. I think I'd replace all the fluids, the timing belts, all that important stuff, and make sure it's ready to roll to Mexico. And this week's guest did exactly this. We've been watching their YouTube channel for quite a few months, so when they agreed to an interview, we were stoked.
Have you ever had a bit of a laughing fit?
Oh, that's right. With Lisa's permission, we left this intact as she tried to recompose herself, just keeping it real and keeping it fun. Amie and Matt were so kind in rolling with it, it just seemed that it needed to stay. So, what do you say, Lisa?
Let's roll into the episode with Amie and Matt of the Traveling Together Journal.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us on the GHT Overland podcast. This is where you get the greatest interviews and insights from overland travelers around the globe, learning from their stories and experiences as we interview overlanders from places like Australia, Africa, the Americas, Pakistan, and today, California. You will learn the basics to the advanced in overlanding, so buckle up and get ready for a new adventure. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lisa. Today's featured guests are Matt and Amie of the Travel Together Journal. Their YouTube channel is one you've either subscribed to or one you'll want to go check out. After a wonderful love story of meeting in Nicaragua, then living in Maui for 3 years, and getting married, Amie and Matt embarked on an overland trip in 2016 from California, south through Baja to Panama and back. Today we are humbled to have them join us to learn from their experiences and stories of overland travel. So without further ado, welcome to the podcast, guys.
Hey!
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. We are humbled that you've joined us. We are big fans of your YouTube channel, so this is pretty exciting for us as well. So fill us in on any blanks we may have left out in your intro and tell us a little bit more about you.
Well, my name's Matt. I'm a ship captain here in the United States. That's what I was doing before we set out. And we spent the last 2 years, like you said, traveling from California down to Panama and back. And now we're kind of reestablishing for a little while we save up to set out on our next journey.
I'm a massage therapist by trade, and I am just working hard for the next adventure.
That's awesome. So we understand in full adventure spirit, you two are now living on a sailboat. Are you planning on some sailing adventure in the future, or is this a temporary stop between overland trips?
This is kind of both. It's we're going to be here for probably a couple of years while we stay local and work, but we'll be doing some local trips out to our Channel Islands off the coast of California and stuff like that.
Yeah, we just went out for a sail this afternoon, and I think we've got some good wind, and we're hoping to do our first sail to the Channel Islands on Wednesday, as long as that wind direction stays the same.
What's the temperature down there right now?
I think it averages between 65 and 85.
Oh, okay.
And what would be your distance in that trip?
It's about 22 miles from our home port out to the closest island.
Nice. So tell us what inspired overland travel for you.
Matt and I are both travelers, and we met traveling in Nicaragua. And when we decided to officially make our relationship a thing and really give it a full go in Maui, we sat down and we were like, okay, well, now that we're together, now what are we going to do? We're travelers. Like, where are we going to go? So we wrote out a list of all the places that were important to us and why. And we had a lot of things in common. And then there was the dog. And we didn't want to keep putting him on airplanes. We put him on an airplane to get to Maui. And we were going to have to put him on an airplane to get off Maui. But at that point, he was going to be 13 years old. So to take him into consideration, and just the fact that we did have a little bit of Spanish under our belt, and we were pretty comfortable with Latin American countries, we decided that we should do a road trip. And we didn't know what overlanding really was. And we just decided on this trip, and then later learned about overlanding.
Then that all kind of fell into place. So how did you decide on the overland trip when you were living in Maui? Is it just with your dog JAEGER that you didn't want to put him on more airplanes, or was there anything else that really spurred on this road trip for you?
Well, I like to surf and I like warm water, so I wanted to go towards the equator. Yeah, other than that, it was mostly the dog. We probably had about 8 different ideas that we were kind of considering, and I did a bit of research about the difficulties of getting the dog into certain countries, but also getting them back out of the countries.
Oh, okay.
And basically just decided that the easiest / funnest thing would probably be to just go back to California, where I'm from, and just get a truck and just be able to drive everywhere.
Gotcha. Okay. So tell us about that truck you drove and your signature white camper that you have on it.
Well, the truck is a 1995 Toyota T100 with a manual transmission and 4-wheel drive. And the camper is a camper shell off of a Tundra that we cut the roof out of and extended up about 2 feet so that we could fit our surfboards inside of the camper.
And do you have a name for your setup?
Oh, for the truck?
Yeah.
Well, the truck is Blue Beauty.
Nice.
And then the camper is Frankenstein. If you look at it really closely, all the patchwork fiberglass that we did, it looks like Frankenstein.
It held up, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It took
That's
a beating,
impressive.
but no issues.
Nice work.
We were only nervous for like the first couple of weeks, and then we're like, okay, I think this is going to work.
Then you're good to go.
Keeps you out of the elements.
Yep.
Yeah, it worked for him.
What is that one thing you valued the most, either on or in your setup?
For me, it's my surfboards. That's kind of the big motivator for a lot of why I like to travel and where I like to go. It's the thing that gets me the most excited.
I have a great appreciation for the camper, as much as I actually hated building it. It keeps us out of the elements. It's our home. And then I also really love our awning, which is also a part of that home extension. So in total, those two things together is just my home base.
And what awning do you guys use? I don't remember seeing that for some reason.
It was
It's an ARB.
Okay.
They offer 2 here in the States. It's the larger of the 2.
Is it 8x8 or 6x6?
I think it's 8 foot by 8 foot.
We went with the biggest one that they had at the time.
And were you glad that you went with a larger size?
Yes. 100%.
Is that mainly like for shade from the sun, or if it rained, what was the biggest benefit there?
All of the above. Mostly probably just shade and just blocking things falling on you, if you're under a tree or there's birds or monkeys. We had monkeys try to poop on us.
Oh,
so,
okay, good.
there's so many things that an awning protects you from.
Yeah, everything's trying to poop on you. It's not a good day.
Anything you originally packed? I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I don't think they were directly. They do the whole, throw it at you.
Oh, my.
They're aggressive poopers.
Mm-hmm. They are aggressive poopers.
Anything you originally packed?
We packed a Dutch oven.
Awesome.
And we didn't pack that. Or we packed a Dutch oven and we got rid of it. We gave it to another set of overlanders.
Anything else that you guys packed with you that you ended up removing from your overall setup?
Nothing major. I think we might have had a Frisbee.
Okay.
No, we did. We packed Frisbee golf Frisbees. I don't know why, but we just had them.
Because it probably sounded fun.
Yeah, and when we lived in Nicaragua together, you could just make up Frisbee golf, with a palm tree and a rock. You just hit the thing, and then you get your points.
Okay.
So we're like, oh yeah, we'll totally do that. And then we didn't.
So what are your current top 2 or 3 destinations, along with a little detail on what made them so special for you?
As overlanders, we kind of tend to like regions. Since you have the ability to kind of move around and stuff. So for me, number 1 would be Baja in Mexico. And one of the things that really makes it special is just it has a lot of open space and very remote places that you can just go camp and not see anybody for weeks. And you can drive hundreds of miles off pavement, and just there's lots of exploring to do and lots of camping. And then my second spot would be southern Costa Rica on the Pacific coast.
Okay.
Really good surf, and once again there was some remote areas where you do a few river crossings and drive down some muddy roads and you don't see any more tourists. But you're still just camped on an awesome beach, and there's just macaws and monkeys up in the trees and beautiful warm water out in front of you. And yeah, just anywhere you can get remote and camp and surf, and I'm in.
Right on. Amie, what about you?
I actually feel very similarly about the regions. I really loved Mexico. Mexico is endless with the amount of variety that you can get. So I love hiking. I love waterfalls. I enjoy being on the beach, and you can have all of that in Mexico.
Yeah, some of those waterfalls that you guys went to were amazing.
Yeah, one of my favorites was Aguacero in Chiapas, and it was extra refreshing because we just spent weeks and months on the beaches in Mexico in the middle of summer, because that's when it's swell season for the surf. So we were just really hot and very salty at that point. And so to get into that river and that waterfall and just, it felt very cleansing.
Okay, nice.
And then I also really enjoy, my favorite thing about traveling is probably wildlife. So Costa Rica, while it's very expensive and a lot of Pan American overlanders don't like it because it's so expensive, I think that you can offset the expense with all the free camping you get, because they reserve the first 100 yards or so of every beach for just public land, and you can just camp for free on it. And then there's always monkeys and birds and parrots flying all over the place and hanging out, and it's just super cool. And you're just camped there for free.
Did you ever get over the awe factor of like all the birds and the monkeys and wildlife that we're not used to in the U.S.?
No. Never.
It's
I love
awesome.
it all the time. Like, I can just sit and watch animals and birds forever. It's my favorite thing.
That's great. So on provisions, how do you plan for purchasing groceries, and any tips you learned along the way that we could learn from?
Well, we have our refrigerator. It's a 66-liter freezer and fridge. And we also had a very small little cooler that was in the cab of our truck. And we could have frozen water bottles in our freezer and then move those to that little cooler. And so on big provisioning days, we would maybe turn that little cooler into kind of a vegetable ice box for a few days. So we could really do almost an entire week's shop. And the biggest reason for that would be if we wanted to go somewhere remote and really be out there. And then we had like a full kitchen, so we were cooking well, eating well. We would go from anything from local tiendas, which are just little stores that have your basic vegetables, eggs and cheese, milk, candy bars, and then to the big markets, which would have the more obscure things oftentimes, like if we were really needing peanut butter, if it had been a while. You know, we're Americans, we have to have peanut butter.
Yes, very true.
Yeah, so things like that, we would just balance it out depending on what was running low.
Okay, cool.
So what is a favorite meal or recipe you enjoyed making while you're traveling?
Something that I started to make often was my easy one-pot Huevos Rancheros. And I would basically scramble some eggs, dump in a can of Herdez salsa, which is, I think it's like 6 ounces of salsa, and then an entire can of beans. And then once it was all warmed and cooked, I turn off the heat, and then you dump in a bunch of cheese in there. And you could either eat it like a dip with corn tortillas chips,
nice,
or put it on leftover rice or whatever. And then if you had extra vegetables, you could just saute those up before you cooked everything else to make it a little healthier. And if you had leftovers, you could make it into breakfast burritos the next day. I don't know. It ended up being a staple.
Nice. And how do you generally do your laundry on the road?
We had a 5-gallon bucket that was actually a lugaloo. Do you know what one of those is?
No. I know about
so
using
lugaloo
the bucket.
is a 5-gallon bucket, and then the lid is a toilet seat.
Oh, okay.
And so we only used it as a toilet maybe twice, but you just put a plastic bag in it. So the bucket wasn't gross or anything. And then on an everyday basis, the bucket served to hold extension cords and the dish soap and the laundry soap and stuff like that. And then on laundry day, we would just empty it out into the tailgate and throw our laundry in there and fill it up with water and hand agitate it. So it was a lot of work. And then you dump it out, and then you put fresh water until it's all cleaned out, and then we line dried it. And we did that probably 95% of the time. We only scored laundry facilities or paid to do laundry maybe 4 or 5 times.
Okay. And were you pretty happy with how that worked out?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if we weren't, we wouldn't have kept doing it.
Yeah, true. The one thing I've always been concerned about is the rinsing. Like, how do you get all the soap out?
Well, you have to put more you have to do it again with fresh
You just
water.
load it back up with fresh water.
Yeah, so we would wait until we were at a camp spot where water was a palanthra. We weren't concerned about water. And so they would have hoses, or we would be at like an RV camping spot or something like that. I would do it at least 2 more times, like clean water.
Okay. Seems to be the popular method with our friends in Germany and the Netherlands. They all seem to do that.
Laundry facilities, even down there, to pay somebody to do your laundry was maybe $3 a pound or a kilo. I mean, that's really expensive. I mean, a few items, like one outfit, is around a kilo. So if you're paying $1 a kilo, I mean, it was surprising actually how many overlanders like do paid laundry, and I'm like, wow, you guys are spending a lot of money not to do your own laundry.
Yep, I think everybody we've talked to so far doing the Americas, I think just about everybody has said that they pay for laundry service.
Yeah. I mean, we saw people doing it, and we're like, that's so how much does that cost? And we would look into it. We're like, well, everybody's doing it. Maybe it's cheaper here. And then we would ask them, we were like, why are we going to spend that much money for somebody to wash our clothes?
$10 buys you a lot of tacos.
It cuts into the taco budget.
So on hygiene, do you also have a shower set up along with your Lug-a-Loop? Or what's your recommendation for keeping it simple and hygienic?
Well, we actually paid to camp pretty often. And so most of the time in those situations, they would have some kind of a shower, whether it was an outdoor shower where you just like wear your bathing suit and scrub up. Sometimes they'd have a proper indoor facility. So that was like the most common thing for us. But if we were getting a bit more remote where we were just wild camping, then we did get a little hose that hooks up to our LifeSaver Jerry can, which is a filtering jerry can that you pressurize. So when you hook the hose up to it, you're able to kind of direct the stream of water. So when we were doing that, to conserve our fresh water, we would soap up and like jump in the ocean to get clean, and then just use the fresh water to like rinse the salt off.
Anything you change about your current setup?
Yeah, that's why we're back. I mean, it's not 100% why we're back, but it's at least a huge percentage. We need to have inside living space. So it took a lot of effort to set up our entire kitchen outside underneath the awning, and to then clean it up and put it back in the truck every single time we camped, which was 99% of the time. And we wanted to cut that down. We want to be able to arrive at camp, and we want our setup to be way shorter and our takedown to be way shorter. And then cooking in the elements, you know, when it's super windy out, you're just going to burn a lot of gas. It's going to be very frustrating. When it's raining really bad, I mean, we ended up just eating cookies and chips and salsa for dinner. You deal with it, but it definitely makes you realize that it would be nice if you had inside living space. And so we'll be changing our camper, and that's one of our goals while we're back.
So you're still going to use the same truck and kind of the same camper setup with some modifications? Is that your plan?
The plan is to use the same truck, but we'll be completely getting rid of the truck bed and just building from the frame up a whole camper and nice. Cutting out the back of the cab and making a pass-through. And big project.
Yeah, there you go.
So it does sound like that Matt's got quite a honey to-do list.
You keep the man busy. So what was your number one biggest challenge you guys had to overcome during your trip?
I would say the biggest challenge was probably making decisions all the time. It's a little bit weird and not something we expected when we set out. But we had 2 years basically where we didn't have to be anywhere or do anything in particular, which is one of the coolest parts of long-term travel, but it also means that pretty much every day and at any point during the day, you're making a decision as to what it is that you're going to do next. So maybe you plan on staying somewhere for a few days, but you show up and it's not what you expected. So then you have to look at your partner and be like, well, should we stay here or should we go? Should we just stay for one night, or how long do you think we should be here? Okay, well, let's stay for a couple nights. And then you wake up the next day and it's just howling wind. And so you got to look at your partner again and be like, well, should we sit here and hope the wind stops, or should we just go? So that was probably our biggest challenge. It's the thing that probably had the most arguments between the two of us, and that got us the most road weary over time. But we obviously still like it enough that we want to get back out there and do it some more.
That's really good feedback. So what do you guys think? What would you recommend to others so that they could go into a trip like that more mentally prepared for those decision-making day-to-day things?
You can't. You just can't. I mean, all you can do to be prepared is know that that is going to happen. When we talk with other overlanders, that's everybody's exhausting task, is the non-stop decision making. You could have a plan. You could say, we're going to go here, but then you get here and you don't like here. So then you have to be like, well, are we going to leave and go to the next spot? And who knows how long that takes. And so you decide, okay, we're going to go to the next spot. And then you get there and you're like, okay, well, do we like it? Is it a good price? Do we approve of it? Do we feel safe? Okay, yeah, well, let's do it. Okay, well, now it's late. Our dinner plans, like, I don't know if we should still make that thing we were going to make tonight. I don't know if we have enough time to do that. So what should we do now? Like, it is just nonstop. And then even when you get to a place, you're like, well, how many days should we stay? Well, you got to get through a night. And then you get through a night and you're like, okay, now how long should we stay? Like, it's just nonstop. And there's no way around it. There's no way around it. That's just how it's going to go. And even if you plan it, the more you plan, the more you're going to be disappointed, because stuff happens and stuff that you can't predict, and you're going to get thrown off your track or your plan. And if you're not already prepared for that, then you're really in trouble. So you're better off just kind of having a loose idea of what it is that you want out of your trip, a loose idea of where you're going to go, and then taking that loose idea and letting it steer you day to day, week to week, and maybe month to month or season to season, and sort of just like having an idea of where you're going with it, but then constantly updating it, like day to day.
Okay, so don't really get stuck in one particular plan. Be open for things as they happen and recommendations from other overlanders as you talk to people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. So on border crossings, what tips do you have in preparing for them?
My number one tip would be cross minimal 2 days before your visa ends. Don't cross on the last day, because if you cross on the very last day and anything goes wrong, you don't have an opportunity to go back into the country you were just in and fix it. So give yourself some wiggle room by at least a couple days, and be very patient. Take some deep breaths. Make sure you have plenty of water. Make sure you have snacks so that you guys can support each other and stay nice to each other, because you have just have to assume it's not going to be a fun day.
Gotcha. How long do you think that they usually take on average?
Well, our shortest border crossing was from U.S. to Mexico. That was 45 minutes. Our longest border crossings were over 4 hours. So we don't have any of the nightmare stories where it took you like 3 days to get across the border. But more often than not, something goes wrong a little bit and holds you up. So you might get through basically the whole process in a half hour, but then the car insurance guy takes you another 2 hours to deal with or something. So...
Oh, those car insurance guys.
The most unexpected things could happen, though. Like, they could lose power and just decide that nobody else is going to cross the border until they get power again. And you don't know how long that's going to take. And so...
Anything unexpected that you needed to have with you, or documents that you weren't expecting?
I did kind of think that I had most of our documents sorted out before we left. It's really common that you need to have copies, just like photocopies of all your documents. So I left with a big folder of our passports and driver's license and paperwork for the car and paperwork for the dog. And then I was a little bit surprised when they would stamp our passport and then say that they needed a copy of that stamp, but that they couldn't make us the copy. So you had to go wander around the border area and find someone who owned a copy machine, and that was their business, was to make copies of your documents. So that usually added a little bit of excitement when the borders were spread out.
So they would, I just want to make sure I understand this right. They would give you a stamp, and then they would tell you, we need a copy of this, but we can't make you the copy.
That's correct. It's pretty common.
So they're supporting local business.
Basically, yeah. Then, I mean,
that's great.
A lot of them, a lot of them are fairly modern facilities if it's a commonly used border crossing. So you can look through their little window and you can see that they have computers and printers and all the stuff to do the job, but it's just their policy that they don't make the copy. So they give you your passport back with the stamp in it, and then you go find the person. Sometimes it involves actually just walking across the border to the other country and getting the copies made and then walking back to show them that you got the copies. So it's a little bit weird, but fairly common.
Interesting. Okay, that's just crazy. I'm not sure why that throws me off so much. But how hard would it be to have a copy machine or even a scanner right at the border? Nonetheless, so much great information and stories with Amie and Matt's unique spin. So that was awesome. We appreciate it. And Amie and Matt, big warm hugs and love to you. We learned earlier today that Matt and Amie had to put their dog JAEGER to rest a couple days ago. And we all know that losing your best four-legged friend is absolutely heartbreaking. So our hearts go out to you.
They will always have a JAEGER angel with them.
Nicely put.
Next week, Amie and Matt share even more insights on their overlanding setup, along with more stories and experience for everyone, from aspiring overlanders to experienced. So if you're not subscribed yet, get on it. It's a good idea to visit the show notes page at ghteoverland.com/podcasts. Select the Traveling Together Journal episode. All the details and helpful links are waiting there for you.
That's right. And send any questions, suggestions, or feedback you may have to ghteoverlandpodcast@gmail.com. If you have an Amazon Echo, it's a lot of fun to tell Alexa, play the GHT Overland podcast. And remember, we'd love it if you'd connect with us on social media. We are at GHT Overland. Be sure to share the episode with your friends who enjoy travel off the beaten path, or just really anyone you come across. Overland travel is all about meeting new friends, seeing the most amazing places as far off from the beaten path as possible, and of course, new food and new drinks.
If you have a favorite drink or food recipe for overlanding...
Amie does.
Yes.
Sorry. Next week, coming up. Awesome episode.
We'd love to feature it and you. Send them to ghteoverlandpodcast@gmail.com. Before you race off, it would mean the world to us if you'd rate and review the podcast. Give GHT Overland a little iTunes love so we can reach as many Overlanders as possible. Thank you, and we will see you next Thursday for part 2 of the GHT Overland podcast with Amie and Matt of the Traveling Together Journal. Be sure to check out their YouTube channel. Bye.